Thank you guys so much for coming. Tonight we are joined by 6 of our board members. Our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Timothy Harney, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Mr. Robert Haas, our Interim Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations, Mr. Luis Frontero, our District Legal Counsel, Mr. Edward McCarthy, our District Clerk, Mr. Zambonetti, and our Student Rep, Ms. Haley Hendershot. As always, there are 2 opportunities for the community to participate during the Board of Ed meeting. The first is just before the board takes up its agenda, and the second follows the disposition of all agenda items. As always, if you'd like to speak, we ask that you come to the podium. You must be a resident or an employee of the school district. Any other persons must be voted on by the majority of the board. And the normal allotted time is approximately 3 minutes. As always, in the back, you'll see for the community, we live stream every Board of Ed meeting. And if you'd like to follow us on Instagram, you can follow us at BBP School District. But at this time, we'll open it up to the community for any new or old business. Not hearing any, we'll send it over to our superintendent. Dr. Harney, how are you, sir?
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Miller. So I do have a little bit of a report for you tonight, just to kind of bring some attention to some things. Just things you may have heard, whether it be through the news or whatever it may be. So a couple of things. First, in regards to a budget update. So Mr. Frontero and I and myself will review tonight's the last set really of codes, the budget codes that we'll kind of go through. And then our plan is at the next meeting, we'll talk about staffing at the next meeting. I also have started to prepare somewhat of a 10-year comparison that we're going to show you. And then we're also going to show you some of the things that we've also been able to accomplish over the years. So that will become part of the next budget update as we're doing. A lot of times you hear also things related to budget. So late yesterday, I'm going to say it was late last night or early this morning, we talked about it as, if you remember, you've heard me talk about the executive budget that comes from the governor's office, which is really mid-January where that comes out. And then usually the process after that is you have the one-house budgets. So the one-house budgets from the Senate and the Assembly came out late last night. I'm just going to share you some of the things that they're recommending, which really is not part of our presentation, because it's, again, now we're at the point where the houses will start to negotiate with the governor, and then they'll come up with their budget hopefully for April 1st. But we'll see what that happens. But some of the things they were talking, like, so for example, within the executive budget, you've heard me talk about the 2% increase for foundation aid. They are recommending 2.9 and 3%, so we'll see what that does. And I've only picked certain things. They started to talk about, and some of these things have been in prior one-house budgets as well. They talked about adjustment for regional cost. That has been something. They talked about increasing the capital outlay exception from $100,000 to $250,000. I know many people are looking at that to be $500,000. Again, you may have heard about the free meals, so they're talking about funding the free meal program for schools. They have spoken about increasing, again, this is only a recommendation, so as I say these, are part of their budget process, is increasing the pre-K funding. You've heard me speak since the early 2000s that it's been a $5,400 allocation per student, and that hasn't changed in 20 years. So that is something that, but again, that is something that they have talked about. They're talking about making adjustments to the zero emission bus requirements. If you heard, that's something very much of a hot topic. They've also started to talk about, if you remember, and this was one of the things I wanted to talk about, is within the governor's budget or the executive budget, they were talking about the cell phones and the banning of devices. And in the governor's recommendations, it was bell to bell. Within the one house, they've asked that the districts have some local control of it. And they've also asked for, depending on the house, that maybe in non-instructional areas that there is some leeway, but instructional areas there would. There is more to come on that, I am sure. But that is just something that as recently has come out as of last night. And then they have talked about, actually, those are probably the main ones in terms of the budget. So we'll continue to update you on that. Remember, as I share that information, it is really just a recommendation, just like when I did the executive budget, it's recommendations. And now you'll have the houses and you'll have the governor's office start to negotiate. And hopefully we're aiming for that April 1st date. so that we'll know really where we are in foundation aid. So that's that. One of the things you're going to hear, and it came out, and you probably have heard this, if you remember, we had the conversation about the Blue Ribbon Committee, which is taking a look at graduation requirements. There was regulations that were passed, or not shouldn't say, that are being put forward that now are under the review process as of yesterday, the 10th, that talked about a life-altering event. So in the past, if a student had a life-altering event or something happened to them, their only solution was, and they were unable to take that Regents, they would have to take it the next time. What they are putting in, or one of the recommendations would be, is a life-altering event. If the student met certain requirements, was like good in standing in the class, was passing that class, and there's a number of things, so I won't go into all those, that basically then you could waive that Regents as a requirement. But they have to show, basically where they had passed the course and they met the requirements of the course. So that is something that has come out, and that is something that they're looking to put in effect for this year. Probably in the near future, I attended a workshop last week when I was in Albany about what it looks like in terms of the graduation requirements. We'll probably do a presentation just to give you an overview. There are a ton of unknowns still, and they're still trying to work it out, but we do have at least a timeline of what they're looking at, so we can start to do that. So that is just something for people as we're looking at the life-altering and the graduation requirements. We have a couple of good news, right? So this weekend coming up, we have the high school, we have the Robo Phantoms who are going to be in the Long Island Regional Championship over in Glen Cove. And then this past weekend, we had at the first Lego League, we had our Robo Phantoms won Innovation, Brainstormers won Core Value, and they will be moving on as well. So that is congratulations to them. And once they finish all their competitions, we will be sure to bring them to the board as well. But congratulations to them and everything that they are doing. And then just a couple other reminders is Thursday, we have St. Baldrick's night. So if you want to get your head shaved, come on down. I can't help you out there, so that's that. And then we also have spring sports that are starting next week on Monday. And then also for the elementary level, their trimester is coming to an end next Friday. So just some dates to be aware of. As you know, and again, in terms of, you've seen me send you a number of emails and invitations in regards to rooms. Right now, we have about 50% of our families signed up, which is a good start. I know that I said that we're not doing this fully until 25, 26, start in July, but we are going to start to test it. And the more I can test it now, the better off we will be comes July. So I would ask that please, everybody, even if your student or your student's teacher is not doing it in the pilot, I will be piloting by sending messages through. It's just so that we can kind of continue and increase the number of people that are signed up. And if you're having some issues, just reach out to your principal or my office, and we'll kind of sort it out. Because as some of the information transferred from our student management system, sometimes there's little glitches. So we'll help you with that as well. So that is kind of my update. I will turn it off to Ms. Hendershot for hers.
Thank you. So last week, Academy Street celebrated the birthday of Dr. Seuss with a Seuss Spirit Week. Each day was a different theme to represent a different Dr. Seuss book. It was a fun week full of reading and celebrating the contributions and creativity of Dr. Seuss. We also began our family community book club with the book The Anxious Generation. We had some great conversations and look forward to more as we read through the next part of the book. Finally, we have the Gooseberry Park One School, One Book community event at BBP Library this Thursday at 6:30 p.m. We look forward to seeing our students and families there. At BPE, Pick a Reading Partner, PARP, is starting this Friday, and next week is full of fun activities like dressing like your favorite character and night on the red carpet, red being R-E-A-D. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to explain that, but I thought it was really cute, so I wanted to make sure it was well received. And this is where families can walk around the building looking at the student writing process and their individual work. The night ends with book awards voted by the students. Next week, Ms. Velasco is starting a Principal Shadow Day where she'll follow a student from arrival to dismissal to learn more about their day. She'll be hanging out with a first grader and will hopefully get to all grades by the end of the year. Last week, Sylvan fifth graders participated in Sylvan Strong Spirit Day, a team building event focused on collaboration, problem solving, and strengthening their sense of community. Today, BBP high school students visited fourth grade classrooms to teach an engaging science lesson on waves, creating a meaningful peer learning experience that connected older and younger students. At the middle school, our Robo Phantom teams had an excellent showing at the Long Island Championship at Hicksville High School this past weekend. Each team earned a first place trophy, placing them third and fourth overall out of 161 teams across Long Island. We are so proud of their hard work, teamwork, and creativity. Looking ahead, we are excited to welcome our incoming sixth grade parents and guardians at our upcoming 5th into 6th grade information night. Please note that the date has changed, and this event will now take place on Tuesday, March 18th at 7 p.m. in the middle school auditorium. We also have a similar event planned for families of our current 7th graders. Our 7th into 8th grade Parent Guardian Information Night is scheduled for March 24th at 7 p.m., also in the middle school auditorium. Finally, at the high school, students are thriving academically and actively participating in extracurricular activities, including our upcoming junior banquet on Friday, March 14th, which promises to be a memorable event. The Red Watch Band Dinner, aimed at raising awareness about alcohol abuse and life-saving techniques, is generating strong interest. We are also observing World Down Syndrome Day on March 21st with activities to celebrate inclusion and awareness. The Frozen Pie fundraiser is underway, and we're hopeful for increased participation from our community. Lastly, we will continue to be piloting a new communication platform, Rooms, to improve engagement with families and keep them informed on important updates.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hendershot. You guys are in luck tonight. We do have 3 presentations. So at this time, we'll turn it over to Dr. Harney to introduce our middle school principal.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. So at this time, as you know, for the last couple of months, we've had each of our buildings and each of our building principals share something that is going on within their school. So tonight, I want to welcome Ms. Westerlin from our middle school principal, who's going to give us an update on some of the things that they are doing there. So welcome, Ms. Westerlin, and we look forward.
Thank you so much. So tonight I am presenting on something I'm very proud of at the middle school. I'm going to talk tonight a little bit about our 6 through 8 science instruction. And so, with that, I want to give you a little bit of a glimpse into um, some of the conversation and planning surrounding that 6 through 8 instruction and the impact that it has on our students. I chose science because even though my background is English, I definitely have a love affair with science. I always have. And because of also the wonderful things that our students are doing right now, as you've heard in science, and because of our science instruction. Um, so I'm just going to touch a little bit on the standards and alignment, as you can see there, as well as how we're facilitating learning and generating engagement within the science classrooms. So to do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the New York State science standards, the learning standards in science, and the framework surrounding those standards. They are plentiful, but I'm going to keep it brief just by touching on the framework of ideas here, the disciplinary core ideas, as you can see, the science and engineering practices, and the cross-cutting concepts to give you a little bit of context as far as our science instruction is concerned. I want to just provide a little more information about these ideas and elements in these next few slides. So the first portion we're going to talk about is the disciplinary core ideas that guide the instruction in the room. They really do inform and form the basis for the learning that's happening in our science classrooms in middle school. When we're talking about our disciplinary core ideas, these are the ideas that you're probably familiar with and remember learning about in your own science classrooms, those vocabulary terms that you had to memorize, those concepts that you were cramming before the test. These are ideas that form that foundation that students will then use to have those deeper conversations and discussions within their classrooms. So here you can see in the picture, I have a little picture here of the water cycle refresh, which was simply the picture of the board that was happening during one of the science lessons where the teacher was going through, obviously, the water cycle. So an example of a disciplinary core idea for the water cycle might be those terms like evaporation, precipitation, the hydrosphere might be one, things of that nature that would really be developed and explained further through the lesson and the conversations and the constructs that the students are going to be engaging with later. So as far as our science and engineering practices, right, this is how our students are learning. And again, it's the second part of the framework of the New York State Science Learning Standards. Here we're talking about how the students are engaging with the topics. What are they doing? So, they might be asking questions throughout the lesson. They might be using models, analyzing data. These are the how portion that we're going to really be focusing on. And so if we're thinking back to that idea about the water cycle and that lesson, what the students were doing was they were creating a storyboard where they were working collaboratively to construct something in order to be able to explain the journey that a water droplet would take through the water cycle itself. And then finally, if we're talking about the New York State Science Learning Standards, we have that cross-cutting concepts, which the way I might explain it to you is really the overarching themes that recur throughout a student's 6 through 8 experience. So these are concepts like, you can see them listed there. There are 7 of them: patterns, cause and effect, scale, proportion, and quantity, systems, and system models. They're all there for you. There are 7 of them, like I said. So again, these are revisited throughout their 6 through 8 experience. And again, drawing on that water cycle lesson, here we might be thinking about how, we're going to look specifically to this energy and matter portion here in the cross-cutting concepts. It's going to relate back to that portion, how energy drives motion or cycling matter. So in other words, how a water droplet might change throughout the different phases of matter through its journey, through that process, through that cycle. And these standards aren't new. These standards have been around for quite some time, probably about a decade, although we do still call them the new standards. I think they were adopted in 2016. But because we continue to discuss them and we continue to want to make sure that the students' experiences are the best possible, and the curriculum is aligned and we're constantly revamping, we're always revisiting these standards to inform that instruction and that conversation. And to that end, the standards are informing our instruction. Our teachers are also trying to facilitate learning in a very engaging way. And so to do that, they are going to look to these instructional strategies that they feel are going to make them as engaging as possible. So they might create collaborative lessons, for example, where our students are going to be sharing information throughout. They're going to be building upon one another's conversations. In this first picture here, you can see we have students that are comparing data. And what they're noticing throughout that comparison and that conversation where they're being collaborative is that there are patterns and trends within their data, and they're able to then notice these patterns and trends and have a conversation about it where they may not have in isolation. So elevating the experience for our students, elevating the conversation, and being able to build on that knowledge, super important. In the second picture there, you can see that I have 2 students who are opening and closing a clothespin. This is an example of hands-on learning. Our science teachers are often creating lessons where our students are doing things. It's hands-on. It's engaging. The students are then able to have a conversation about why it was very easy to open and close that clothespin at the beginning of the lesson, but it became more challenging as they continued to do that. What was the effect on their muscles, and again, highlighting the fatigue that they were experiencing, why that would happen. They are also creating inquiry-based and discovery-based lessons, and these are really lessons that are driven by curiosity. And they're lesson plans where the teachers are allowing students to, or providing the opportunity for students to generate their own questions, and then explore the answers to those questions. They're also creating lessons in which the students are going to discover the learning, where they're designing lessons in which the students are then going to make a hypothesis and test it. Here we have a teacher, Mr. Birdie here, who's holding up a string, and he might ask a question like, are we going to need more or less string if the muscle contracts? Why would we need, what do you think about that and why? So again, questioning is very important in these inquiry and discovery-based sorts of lessons. And this really all culminates in the student experience, right? So we're doing all of this and having all of this conversation about the standards and the different instructional strategies, because what we really want to do is make sure that our students are having the best possible experience. And, we want it to be positive because, of course, we know that if a student's experiences are positive in the classroom, they're going to be more engaged, and therefore they're going to do better. They're going to perform better academically. We'll have higher student retention rates, obviously. But even more so, what we're noticing with our students, obviously, is that they're interested in science, not just in the classroom, but beyond, right? And we're seeing that because we're noticing that our students are challenging themselves. We typically have between 30 and 40% of our students who are moving into an honors class in 8th grade, which is fantastic. They're doing really well in those courses. We have about 29 students enrolled currently in our science research class, which is an elective where they're participating, and another 33 that are expressing interest in just from 6th grade moving into 7th grade alone. So that's a really great number. We have a number of clubs where our students are focusing on nature and ecosystems, and they're also being given the opportunity to compete with our robotics and with STEM challenges, and they're doing fantastic, right? We know they're ranked 3rd and 4th, our robotics team, out of 161 teams on Long Island. That's amazing. And our Science Olympiad team brought home 14 event medals, and they're headed to the state competition in April. So, they're just doing really, really great work, and I'm super proud of them as the principal of the middle school. But again, none of this is done in isolation, and it is absolutely your support. Thank you so much in supporting these programs, and the community's support in, passing the budget and making sure that these programs can exist, and not only exist but thrive, and we're able to provide more opportunities for our students. And of course, our teachers, right? Our teachers are developing these lessons. It's work, it's conversation, it's time, and they're really committed to doing that. And it's fantastic to see how they're taking advantage of these professional opportunities, these professional development opportunities, and engaging in these conversations to see our students thrive. So again, I really am very, very grateful and super proud. So thank you all very much. And I'm very happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Westland. Any questions from trustees? Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you doing this tonight. Big round of applause. We will turn it over to Dr. Harney for our security presentation.
Yeah, thank you again, Ms. Westerland, for that. We really do appreciate it. So our next presentation is, if you remember a couple of months ago, Project SAVE Committee was given a charge to take a look at overall security within the district. Mr. Zarcone was here, I want to say it was probably right before the holidays, and kind of did a review of where we were. Tonight is a follow-up to that, where him and Mr. Mike Griffin is with us as well, who does some consultant work with us. Since the charge, they've been meeting with the Project SAVE Committee on pretty much every 2 weeks, as they have some information to share with us here tonight. So first of all, I'd like to thank both of you for coming. We really do appreciate it and putting this together for us. With that, I'll turn it over to you guys. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. So as Dr. Harney mentioned, this is our presentation on security in the district. And this is our March 2025 committee feedback to the Board of Ed and community. As an of introduction, here's our purpose and mission statement for our Project SAVE committee in the district. It's kind of our mantra that we live by: creating, maintaining, and ensuring a safe and secure school environment where children can learn, staff can instruct, and the community may interact. As far as the committee's task, we reviewed the current state of security across the district. We identified areas in need of enhancement or improvement. We considered physical security. We looked at technology, staffing, and the policies that we have. We compared information, best practices with other districts, and we collaborated and discussed security options with the Suffolk County Police Department. In terms of our process, as Dr. Harney mentioned, at the Board of Ed meeting in October, the Project SAVE committee was given a charge to review the district security. A committee then, we typically meet on a monthly basis. We began meeting on a bi-weekly basis starting in November in order to be able to compile all this information, which led to a previous presentation in December on the current state of everything that we had in place in terms of physical devices, staff relative to security, all the student mental health and wellness programs that we have in the district, and then all of the partners that we interact with when it comes to school security. The committee in turn then reviewed all of our prior Project SAVE reports to establish a current baseline and previously reviewed suggestions. We have a document that we've been keeping since 2017 of items that we were looking to do to identify, to fill any gaps that we think that we might have in our security protocols. Data was collected on the use of armed guard security and/or weapon detections that are being used in Suffolk County schools. The Suffolk County Police Department, both the SROs and officers from their Homeland Security Office, briefed the committee on best practices and current philosophies. And then the committee conducted a final review of all the meetings to prioritize recommendations to the board. So with this, here's our recommendations. They're broken down into short-term and to long-term. So maintain the use of current security protocols in the event of an emergency. Continue to utilize the 911 system as necessary in an emergency situation. Enhance the use of student IDs for grades 6 through 12. Phase in of kiosks for student entry into the middle school and the high school buildings. Monitor all outside contractors wearing their IDs when working in district, and ensure that staff have key access to common places. And then lastly, for the short term, limit the points of entry into each building. These are items that we feel can be accomplished in the near future. Some can be phased in this year, if not next school year for sure. The longer term, install an intercom system in the main gym lobby of the high school. Enhance communications at the visitors check-in space at our middle school. Install external emergency notifications. So if we're in a lockdown or lockout situation, there would be a blue light that would be either strobe or illuminated on the exterior of the building, just warning people not to come into the building. Initiate a district-wide security detail to patrol all buildings from 5 to 11. Increase security staff at all buildings to include enhanced coverage of exterior, perimeter, and doors. Install separate spaces in our vestibules for staff and visitors. And continue to gather information on security enhancements and best practices. So what I did was with the help of the committee and Michael Griffin, we took each item and put action steps to them, and then wanted to just bring forth factors that would have to happen in order for these things to occur. So the first two bullets of the first two short-term items aren't going to really require much to get done. Enhancing the use of student IDs in grades 6 through 12, we'd have to issue badges to all students. Most of the grades in 6 through 12 do have them. Then we would just need to develop procedures and protocols for putting them in place. Phase in of kiosks for the student entry into the high school and middle school buildings. One of the factors for this is it provides real-time accurate student attendance in the building, so we can quickly determine who is in the building with us. The high school is currently looking to do a pilot later this school year to utilize kiosks at student entry points. Monitor all outside contractors wearing their ID when working in district. This provides for an accurate account of all visitors on school grounds, particularly in the event of an emergency. If we're going to account to make sure everyone's out of the building or everyone's safely secure, in a campus area, if we have to utilize an off-campus location, that we're able to account for everyone that's here. And then also ensuring that all staff have key access to common spaces. So this would allow all staff to open and lock doors for rapid response during an emergency situation. So things like the copy room or the faculty lounge or the conference room or the guidance office or the main office, that all staff would be able to key in if they were at that location in the time of emergency. So they just don't have the keys to their classroom. So again, these are all items that we felt could be done in the short term. In terms of items in long term, install an intercom system at the main gym lobby of the high school. The factors here is it's going to enable access control at the main gym lobby. Currently, there is no intercom system. But it would require a security guard staffing to implement this. Enhance the communication of visitor check-in space at the middle school. We're looking to create a space to screen visitors prior to gaining access into the school lobby. And this could potentially require a physical redesign of the entrance. Right now, due to that, just where the lobby is placed, when someone is buzzed through the first set of doors before they're buzzed into the school, they're kind of like in a glass enclosure. And when it's warm out, it's hot in there. And when it's cold, it's really cold in there. So we're looking to possibly just enhance that setup. Installing external emergency notifications, the blue lights for lockdown and lockout, which I mentioned. This creates a visible notification to alert those outside the building not to enter during the emergency. Initiating a district-wide security detail to patrol all buildings from 5 to 11. After-hours security has been identified as an area of focus for all schools. That was information that we got from other districts as well as Suffolk County PD. Increasing security staff at all buildings to include enhanced coverage of external perimeter and doors. This would mean adding one additional guard to each building, and they could provide continuous exterior coverage on the campus. So you'll have someone currently at our elementary schools, as you know, we have someone at the greeter desk. Their job is to screen visitors to the building. They do have access to the cameras that they can view, but what this would mean was you would have a set of eyes exterior of the building so they can see anyone potentially coming onto the campus. They would also be able to regularly check the exterior doors. We currently do that, but this would allow for it to happen on a more frequent basis throughout the school day. Installing separate spaces in our vestibules for staff and visitors. As you know, they're a shared space. So what it would do is separate staff lanes, and it would enable security to focus solely on visitor access. It would prevent the potential of any piggybacking, so a visitor from the outside following a staff member into the building. That has not happened. We have not had that problem, but this would just be something that could, potentially, it could be problematic. We don't know, but it's a shortfall that we identify. This would require a physical redesign of the entrances. As part of our research and discovery, 2 items did come up, and we did have some extensive conversations on it. Currently not on the list of recommendations, but I want to bring them forth. The 2 items, deployment of magnetometers and wands at high school and middle school entry points. Screening would be required at all entrances. So that would mean staff, student, and deliveries that are coming into the building. Effective screening requires 100% control of all entrances to ensure that non-screened entrances would be locked. And then each screening lane would require additional security staffing. So all of that item, including all of the recommended items that I said in both the short and long term, timeframe, those are all preventative measures. And the Project SAVE Committee has been talking about preventative measures for quite some time. The next item that I want to bring forth is, as part of our research and discovery, initiate the use of armed guards in the district. Some of the factors to consider, we'd have to determine if armed guards are exterior only, or are they carrying inside the building as well. Determine if current security staff transitions to the armed guard, or do new hires get required to be employed within the district. Determine if you're using internal staff or contracted security. There's certain variables, there's costs, there's training, there's liability. You need policy, you need use of force, and you need their scope of work clearly defined. When we compared a comparison of 41 districts within Suffolk County, this is the latest data that we were able to, I believe there's 66, so 41 were part of a survey. Here's the breakdown in terms of who has armed security. 12, I think that should be 12 of 41, I'm sorry, approximately 30%. Outside only, 6 of the 12. Inside only, 1 of 12 districts. And both, inside and outside, 5 of 12. In terms of sourcing them, district hired 3 of the 12 districts, and those utilizing private security is 9 out of 12 districts. The other item that came up in our research and discovery was weapons screening. There are currently 3 out of 41 districts, or roughly 7%, that are currently utilizing this process, that being either wands or magnetometers upon entry. And to note, none of the 3 districts that are utilizing the weapons screening process have armed security, and 2 of those 3 districts have had prior incidents with weapons inside the buildings. So just getting to some summary points. Focus on preventative strategies. Again, the Project SAVE Committee, going back to 2017, 2018, on our focused, our areas of improvement, we've always looked at preventative strategies. We're going to continue to gather information and research on the various action steps that I brought forth. And then also we want to report back to the Board of Ed and community regarding the implementation of the immediate action steps. Questions and suggestions are welcome. There's my official title when it comes to security in the district. However, most of you know me as the high school assistant principal. So any security-related questions certainly can come my way. If you have something specific to a building, you might be better reaching out to one of the building principals. But again, I'll take any question or suggestion from anyone.
Any trustees with any questions? Ms. Connie?
Thank you for the time and thought that your team put into all of this. I know it was a big task that we asked of you. And I ask this knowing that some of our security concerns won't be talked about in public by design, just for extra safety. So if I'm asking a question that you can't answer, please just tell me. Regarding the kiosks that will be piloted, how many do we currently have?
How many do we currently have?
Yeah.
We have 1 kiosk. It's utilized in the morning at the high school for students that arrive after the first bell has rung to begin class. And then we slide it over to the cafeteria, and we utilize it for the periods that students are allowed to make an exit during their senior study hall or their lunch.
Okay.
So we're tracking students as they leave the building and come back for egress. Just so if there's an emergency during a period, we can quickly run a report and find out who's not in the building, and then, figure out a plan to account for them.
And do you happen to know the price point-ish if we were to get more?
Not off the top of my head.
So,
Barney might know.
geez, that is left. Ms. Connie, so currently we use one company. Sorry, we use one company. So the high school administration, Mr. Walcott, has been doing some research, and he's actually looking at another company. The difference would be when the pilot would be done, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but we would do it as, we're trying to try new software, so we're trying to work with a new company. which actually we think in the end might be cheaper than our currently contracted one. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I can get that for you. But also, we would also do it a little bit different where now, if at that time, students would be required to have their ID, and now they'd be checked as they're coming in at the beginning of the day. Where right now, the kiosk is really rolled out for students that are late. So that would be something that they would be looking. So the pilot would include more than we are currently doing, just so you're aware. Okay?
Any other trustees with questions? Ms. Pignataro?
Just to echo Mrs. Kane's comment, thank you so much for you and the committee for all the work that you've done. It's a large group of people to convene twice a month, so that's a huge task in itself. I just want to thank you also for the opportunity for me to join some of the meetings. So I've really been anxiously awaiting this presentation. I really appreciate the work that went into it, especially knowing how many diverse opinions you have in the room. My question is maybe less for you and more for Mr. Frontario. If we were to start looking at the cost of some of these vestibule improvements, what would be our timeline for that? And would we be able to talk about those things during our current budget development process?
So I think you're thinking about some of the things maybe, so for example, I think if you're looking at this within the immediate budget right now, everything you've seen, we have not included anything in the budget. Okay, so where we are. So if we were to do anything, any of the numbers that you've seen over the last couple of weeks and what you'll see tonight, that 4.72, that is where we currently are in terms of budget to budget with that 3.45 tax levy, okay? If you are looking at some of the other items, it may be something if the board wishes to look into in the immediate, then we may be looking at other things to trade, because I don't think from a recommendation, myself or Ms. Frontero, we go to increase anything. We'd have to look to make some decisions in terms of if there's something that we're looking to remove, to replace something with. So that would have to come from a recommendation. We would need that information tonight if that was the question. Some of the items in there are more like, for example, if you're talking about vestibules and stuff, that's not a budget item. That's probably through a bond of some sort. Because that would be an item, I just remember when we were doing the bond, the cost that goes with some of those items. I don't think you would see it in our transfer to capital line. Tonight you're going to hear us talk about a capital reserve for the first time, but that's not for 10 years from now. So I think you're really talking about bonds. So I think that's why they tried to do it, I think, in some of the immediate and then more of the long-term pieces. Anything you're probably talking in terms of security or staff, again, there would be additional cost to that. The question would be, is that something we'd want to do immediately? Then we'd be looking to trade something. Or is it something we'd want us to make sure we're building in as we're going forward and continue to enhance what we've done? Even over the last couple of years, we've expanded the hours of our security at the elementaries, at the middle school and high school. We have nights now where we have security on later than we have in the past, where we try to have some of the events, we do them in those type of things. If any of the buildings are asking for additional security for any of the events, we always provide them. So we never get in the way of that. So we've been doing that as we've been going along. I think here you're just looking for something more on an automatic every basis no matter what. Where here we've kind of watched where the things going on in the building.
Any other trustee questions? Is there any other information you'd like the committee to look into to help you gain clarification or feedback? Mr. Johnson?
I guess, this all started with a community member coming and asking about the feasibility of armed security guards, correct? And then we put the SAVE committee to look at not just that, but also other security measures. And you guys have done a fantastic job at looking at all these alternatives. But we're kind of getting to this point where now we're talking about money and bonds and structural changes, which, if necessary, is great. I think I would say the next step is these are great suggestions, but I think we need to assess risk. What's the risk? Are there any limitations or risks for some of these areas that these things would mitigate? Because if we're talking about redesigning something with spending several $100,000 or $1 million in redesigning a vestibule, is it necessary if the risk is low? That's kind of what I'm That's kind of what I would say before we start jumping into looking into costs and stuff. Like, let's identify what mitigation these provide for the risks we have and the level of risks we have, and decide whether or not additional security guards or having, there was a discussion of lanes and using a wand. If there's an extremely low risk of, somebody trying to bring a weapon in, it might not be something that's 100% required, especially for the cost. So these are just some of the things. Like, I think we've come up with a lot of great alternatives to tighten security, to make it a more secure environment. But before we start discussing implementation, let's look at the risks and the risk mitigation that they have. That's the only thing I would put back on the committee before we really start looking at costs and whether or not we're going to start implementing some of these things, especially the more expensive ones.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I would just add, Mr. Zarcone, if you would consider with the committee, you marked here armed security guards, 12 out of 14 districts, 30%. Would the committee look into considering how many school districts have school resource officers as well?
Sure, we can bring that forward.
Because to me, that would be very similar to an armed security guard. So I would think those numbers are going to change. Any other questions for the committee or suggestions?
Can I ask you for clarification on that? The reason I asked that question is, for example, Bayport Blue Point has an SRO appointed to us.
I would say
So
full-time,
you're looking for
full-time,
somebody
part-time in the
who
building.
just lives on the campus full day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions, feedback from board members? Mr. Zarcone, do you have any questions from us?
Nope, I'm good.
Thank you so much, Mr. Griffin, Mr. Zarcone. Any community members, any questions? Thank you so much. We'll turn it over to Dr. Harney for a quick budget presentation number 3.
All right. Well, welcome to budget presentation number 5. So I'm going to do the first part. Some of it will be a little bit of a repeat, but I think it's important that you hear it as we're going forward. And just as I said earlier on, so as we've been going through this, we've been really focusing on the various budget codes within our budget. And as you've seen, there's a number of codes that are within it. So really where we come to you, so that's where we'll end tonight. We're going to finish with the rest of the codes, which are really in the instructional area. And then after that, next week, we'll start to, 2 weeks from now on the 25th, that's when we'll start to take a look at staffing. As I mentioned, we'll also start to take a look at something that I wanted to do, and then I've included in past ones, but kind of a 10-year comparison in terms of categories and like what percentage of the budget does that category take up. So for example, if it was special education or benefits, what I wanted to take a look at was there a major change in any specific area over those 10 years? We know that we've, in terms of staff, we've changed some of our not expectations, that's the wrong word. In terms of like, so for example, if we had people who were focusing much more on social and emotional, right? So over the last couple of years, you heard me last year talking about staff where, yes, our enrollment has dropped, but 10 years ago we had 1 social worker where now we have 5. And the idea of having 1 in every single building. So that was something that we'll continue to kind of talk about as we move to the next presentation, along with some of the things that we've been able to do that maybe that people aren't aware of over that same time period, and things that we've been able to accomplish with the support of the Board of Education and our community. So we'll do that as well. So really tonight, as I said, we'll take you through the last couple of codes. So here is your purpose for tonight. It's really just reviewing the final of the 2000s. Capital reserve. So what you are going to hear us talk about tonight is, and we've talked about this in the past years, is about establishing a capital reserve. Remember, that is not going to have any impact on the tax levy. I think that is important for people to know. All of a sudden they see that and they think that's a concern. That is not the case. Really, a capital reserve allows us at some point in time to do capital projects. So maybe that would, historically, right, the district for years has had to go out for bonds. So maybe that will be able to may help us to go out for a lesser bond or maybe no bond at some point. But it is something that we have to review because it is something that the public would need to vote on. So really what we're going to talk about tonight, and then when there is a referendum, at times when we do the budget vote, there will be a separate referendum for a capital reserve. And all that means is we're asking to establish a capital reserve. So this way, if we do have surplus at some point, we can start to build that capital reserve. And then maybe it would come to fruition in 10 years or so from now that we would then have to have another vote to basically say, this is what we would be using the money for. So that would be, again, be a community. So that is something that Mr. Frontera will talk a little bit more about, but that kind of gives you the gist as we're going forward. So that's something, and then just other items that are coming up. So here's the agenda for tonight, which I'm not going to read to you, and I've kind of already reviewed it. So we'll go through that. Obviously, everything is going to be based around our strategic plan that we've spoken about in the past. And here is really the calendar that Mr. Frontera has put together. Again, we finish these codes tonight. Then we have March 25th. And then really we have 1 or 2 meetings left. And then we'll have to do the budget presentation, May 6th, the hearing, I should say, the budget hearing you'll have. So this is a slide you've seen over and over. You see up on the top here, and I don't know, I can't see my red light, but you'll see where we're talking about the instructional piece, which we're focusing on right now. And again, for the past couple of weeks or months, we've talked about a budget-to-budget increase of 4.72. One of the things that we are hoping to bring to the board at our next meeting is a couple alternatives where we're looking to kind of decrease that, the budget-to-budget review. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to change our tax levy, but what it will allow us to take a look at then is what type of revenue would we need to kind of close the gap. So that's something that we are looking to do and set up for the next time we come together. We didn't do that here because we kind of stayed to the idea that we're just going to present codes tonight, and then that will be kind of what we're doing the next go around. So this is something you've seen before. There's the headings and stuff. I'll just go through this. I just think this is important, especially now that the executive budget has come out, right? The One House recommendations have come out, I should say. Remember, I always bring this up because they talk about this 2%. And again, my argument is from a district, our overall state aid is actually less than 2%. And I've said that over and over. You would have saw in the paper, late January that it was $689,000, which equals to 3.9. I talked in the past about the pre-K money that they had put in there, which I think is a misnomer because pre-K money can only be used. It's a federal fund. You cannot use it in your general fund. So we have taken that basically out because that is not an increase because if you don't use it, you can't use it for anything else. That was one of the things that was talked about last year is, hey, you're getting all this aid and you're not using it on the pre-K students. That is not the case. We are fully expended when it comes to that. As a matter of fact, we do use some money from our own general fund to support the pre-K as we go the full pre-K. So here you go. And then you have the other miscellaneous state aid. So when you take a look at all the state aids, and again, I'm not going to review everything because we've done this before, but in the end, we have an addition of $208,000. 233 would have been the 2%. So we are under that 2% in terms of overall aid that we are receiving from the state. Now, hopefully, we'll receive another, if based on the legislators, and they said, all right, 2.9 or 3%. If you're trying to figure out dollars in here, it's probably $110,000, $115,000, $120,000 thereabouts additional. Again, it will help us, but it's not going to make a huge difference in what we're talking about here with us. So really, that kind of takes you through that. Here we have the codes. So with that, I'm going to have Mr. Fronterio walk you through codes. Remember, as you look at codes, sometimes you'll see a large jump into percents because that can be misleading, which could really be $1,000 that you're talking about just because of the size of it. You'll also see things in here of various jumps because we're trying to, again, move, whether we move the staff member from one section to another section, so you might see a jump in that area. So those are the things just to kind of pay attention as we're doing that, but I'll let Mr. Fronterio walk you through the rest of this. Thanks.
Thank you and good evening. And keep in mind that the budget-to-budget that we're looking at, the 4.72, includes everything we know and love about the district. And even in the other scenarios that we're working through and we'll present on the 25th, also pretty much preserve all our programs and services for our students. So that you can be sure of in the process of doing that. But of course, always will be challenging. We'll be covering the expenses with the revenues that we need to come up with. And hopefully we'll see an increase in state aid as well. These are the functional areas that I'll cover very quickly and that you should at least see once in the process of going through the budget development. So 2128, the format's the same as in the other presentations where I covered functional areas. It's the function, the description, the adopted budget 2324, the actual expenditures 2324, which is audited. Our adopted budget for 2425, the proposed budget 2526, the dollar change, the percent, which sometimes can be a little misleading, but it's still a piece of our process of showing it. And of course, the comments, which really give you a flair for what it's all about. What is this function really take care of? So we have our world languages. As you can see, the percentage increases mild, and for the most part, as you can see, we have our staff included here in world languages and material supplies, workbooks, textbooks, etc. Usually the increase is a combination of both people moving up a step and perhaps additional supplies or supplies that we never bought before or new things that we want to add to the curriculum that might drive a little bit of that increase. In terms of business education, here we have a teacher and a half, a little bit of an increase here because a teacher not only got an increase but also moved from one column to the other as well, which would change their salaries a little bit, and that's why you might see about a 7.15% budget to budget. We move into academic intervention, and here, of course, we put our money where our mouth is in terms of helping our students in the process and maybe helping to avoid special ed placements as well through academic intervention. We have our teachers, our TAs, who are involved in this through K-8 endeavor for the most part, and we have workbooks and supplies and supports and so forth, and essentially the increase is basically staffing. Teaching enrichment, and here we have increase related to teaching materials and supplies. That increase is really, and as you see, percentage, oh my God, 605%. It's, again, it's a magnitude of the dollars, but for the most part, Mr. Haas cut an area in a function, the 2070 function, which was one of the things I talked about, I think, the last workshop. So a reduction there ends up an increase over here is essentially what happens, because we're looking at it perhaps in isolation, but it really needs to be looked at the total package, if you will. Teaching testing, of course, is pretty much a BOCE service for the most part. And of course, we live and die by our statistics and our student performance, and all of this is tied very closely to that. Teaching arts and education, we're just budgeting closer to what we're spending. A lot of what we spend in terms of this is offset by contributions from the PTA and BOCE's aid. Looking at the high school commencement, here again, because we separated out, we're planning on having a high school graduation, of course, and we're actually just, the numbers increasing a little bit because we're anticipating some additional costs that for the sound system and for other materials and supplies that we'll need, working with Syntax, who does our brochure, and so forth. We're seeing some increases there. So just to be safe and on the safe side, or if there are any new initiatives that Mr. Walcott would like to include in that, we have a little bit of room for those kinds of funding. With respect to My Kids, which is the morning program before school, that's pretty much supported by some funding from users. For the most part there, we're trying to correct the number. The actual expenditure is really more like $123,000. We have one staff member who really heads up the program and about 20 people that work part-time for about an hour and 45 minutes in each school, their hourly rates. So let's say that if the overall cost is about $120,000, the fees bring in about $77,000, and the impact to the general fund is about $48,000 thereabouts. Teaching grade 6, we're not losing a teacher. Actually, we're not reducing the number of teachers in grade 6. We're actually going to be right now. Dr. Harney mentioned before that he's having discussions about staffing, and that will again come up again at the next meeting on the 25th. But really, at the end of the day, when the dust settles, there will be a staff member moved who currently exists in one area of the budget will be moved to grade 6. And so it's budget neutral. It's not going to increase us at all. It might change anything. It's just that a new staff member will be assigned at the grade 6 level who was already elementary certified. Various building staff we have here in Bayport, Blue Point. We like to bunch these positions together. So in the various building and staff services, we've got clerical staff at all the building levels, teacher aides, and a lot of things involved in basic building operations are all sort of meld into this one functional area. We have special education, and here again we have our director, our teachers, our aides, our teacher assistants, and so forth, all involved in the special ed process, going down only because of changes, anticipated changes in student placements for the most part. Remember that a BOCES placement for some of our students could be $120,000. A change either way would affect our budget for sure as you move through this. And then we have occupational education through BOCES. And basically, they help us set this rate because they'll do an average of the number of students being involved in this process. And we've increased it significantly from the time that I got here to now in terms of the number of placements. So we're really at about 42 or 37, I think, is next year, and 43. So they average it out. And it's not a simple 3% BOCES increase like we see in a lot of other functional areas of BOCES where we'd anticipate an increase. Here it's pretty much the number that they pretty much have given us as what we expect to be billed for the most part. And BOCES teaching special schools, we keep a line in the budget for alternative high school services should we need them, and this would probably help one or two students should the need come up. And then there's another grouping of functional areas in 2000 series, which I'll be finishing up right now. We have a school library and audio visual. Again, you're seeing pretty much maintenance of effort, our staff, the teacher aide assigned, all the materials and supplies, the BOCES services, not only to run the software of the library that actually manages it, but also all of the virtual references and collections that BOCES are able to provide for us, and other vendors to make it a comprehensive area for students to get information and research. Computer-assisted instruction, again, that's pretty much, we have one staff member basically overseeing that, but it has to do with our, one-on-ones and replacing computers, our software licenses, all the important things that we need to do to keep our computer-assisted instruction moving forward and helping our students in this digital society of ours. And in terms of digital communications, we're moving over to an aptG. And we're just showing where our funding is for that, and it's going to be district-wide, building-wide, district-wide. Everyone will be using it to communicate. In terms of guidance, we have two at the high school, one at the middle school, and a clerical support to manage that. And, of course, some of the services that we use in terms of Naviance, which is a career software that helps students navigate a lot of the things that they might be interested in terms of where they might be headed career-wise. Health services is our nurses, and again, for the most part, we have seven, I believe it is, thereabouts, and one substitute. And of course, we happen to see a decrease there because for years we were budgeting for COVID supplies, which we no longer need to have to, thank goodness, budget for. Psychologists and social workers, like I said, we have one in each building, and this is basically the services that we're providing to our students through these individuals. Co-curricular activities are very broad, wide breadth of activities we offer all of our students. The Bayport Blue Point experience is a very rich one, wonderful one, and it doesn't fall short in terms of co-curricular activities. And lastly, 2855 interscholastic athletics. And here we have our athletic director, a person who supports the effort, and all of the materials and supplies we need to run our comprehensive athletic program. And of course, we see things, change along the way, and things get more expensive. Gaming officials, for example, has something that has really increased significantly over the past couple of years, and is reflected there. As Dr. Harney mentioned, we wanted to get out there and start to show this thing about the capital reserve, and this would ultimately be on May 20th, be part of a referendum. You'd be voting for the budget as one referendum. You'd be voting for trustees, and then you would be voting for the approval to establish a capital reserve. And again, that needs to be a structure with a capital reserve, and this certainly shows that. So the reserve would exist for a 10-year period Doesn't mean you have to use it in 10 years. It can go, you can hold on to it for 20 years. But you can put money in over a 10-year period. It cannot exceed $10 million. The first year of it, we would allow up to $2 million, and thereafter $1 million. But we have to have the funds in order to do it. So it depends on what's available at year end in terms of fund balance, because we have 5 other reserves as well as the capital reserve, and we'd be looking to whatever funds we have, we might be able to divert some now and start building into this capital reserve. But you can fund it for 10 years, but it doesn't mean you have to use it over 10 years. You could fund it for the next 10 years and then use it on the 11th or 12th year with vote. You'd have to go back to our citizenry and basically have a referendum as to how you want to use the money for capital projects. I can tell you that the legal counsel has given us a resolution. It is action-packed. They think of everything you could possibly do, because if it's not mentioned in that resolution, you can't do it. So it's filled with everything you could possibly think of in terms of capital projects. So nothing is missed in terms of your ability to have that flexibility when the time comes, because again, a capital reserve will help us perhaps avoid bonding or a combination of both, and that's usually a pretty good scenario if you have to have one. And lastly, March 25th will be action-packed. We may also, I believe, have a presentation from our building committee, the Budget Advisory Committee, and I think they'll be ready to make a presentation as well about their recommendations. So we'll see about that. And then, of course, anything we know about state aid, we keep hearing that it might be a late budget ultimately, but hopefully we'll have more information. As Dr. Honeyhart mentioned before, we have the one budget already so far, so that's a step in the right direction. We'll do an analysis of the 10-year period of 2014 to 2024, and some other things that we wanted to talk about, hopefully get a chance to explain it, particularly when we talk about the couple of versions of the expense side of the budget. We also want to talk at the same time about the revenue side as well. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Fronterio. Any questions from trustees? Dr. Harney, want to share one item?
Just one thing real quickly as you look at this. If you looked at code 2630, which is probably up the most within these codes that Mr. Fronterio has shared, which is the computer-assisted instruction. A lot of this is we have to start to go into new licensing to replace some of the one-on-one devices. If you remember during COVID, we kind of sped everything up and we went K-12. It's a number of years now, so those licenses need to be updated. The devices need to be updated. Software needs to be updated. And then obviously, cost of cybersecurity continues to be a focal point. So that's really what you're seeing in that area. I just wanted to point that out because that is one of the larger increases, but that's why, just so you know.
Thank you, Dr. Harney. Any other trustee questions? Ms. Pignataro?
Hi, I just have, I needed a few extra moments to kind of collect my thoughts. I did have a question related to the budget, but not specific to these codes, so I hope that would be all right to ask now. Kind of circling back to the Project SAVE conversation, I feel like, and I speak as an educator myself, we sometimes get mired in committees and subcommittees and recommendations and things like that, and nothing feels more frustrating than being called into a bi-monthly committee and then to have the Board of Education say, your goals are long-term. It feels like, a kick the can. So I would like to ask you if, as we look at the current budget, before we adopt the budget, if we could at the very least look at the lower financial impact, broad security impact items to see what those items cost for additional kiosks, whether it's with the new company or the old, for the IDs for grades 6 through 12, for the blue lights, possibly for audible alarms on doors. So those smaller items, if we could see what that looks like in the budget, and then if we can kind of commit to a longer-term conversation about the larger items.
I'm sure we could do that. I mean, right now, we're budgeting pretty much what we know and have already in terms of security. So there's no reduction of any kind. It's basically what we currently have at the moment. So, sure.
Any other questions from trustees? Any community member questions? Mr. Fontario, thank you so much. We appreciate it, sir. Moving on to the agenda. Are there any items the board would like removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda? Not hearing any, can I have a motion to approve consent agendas items F through K? That was Mrs. Kane, second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 6-0. Moving on to our first regular agenda item. There are 5 or 6 tonight. Can I have a motion to gratefully accept from Island Outreach Foundation $45,365 for the high school wellness room? Ms. Conley, second. Ms. Pignataro. As always, I don't know, Dr. Hardy, if you want to make a mention, but Dr. Hardy's worked closely with multiple companies, and we're very thankful for everything they've done for our school and for our mental health. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Moving on to the first reading. Can I have a motion to adopt the first reading of policy 2100, school board legal status, 2160, board member, school district officers and employee code of ethics, and 2300, Board of Education memberships? Ms. Conley, second. Ms. Pignataro, just so quick update, they're just really minor changes in all 3 of these, and we added language to our policy 2300, Board of Education membership, to signify our student representative responsibilities. For Ms. Hedershot. I'm sure she'll love reading it. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 6-0. This is what Mr. Frontiero was just talking about. Can I have a motion to approve for the ballot based on May 20, 2025, our capital reserve resolution? Ms. Conley, second. Ms. Pignataro, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. This is, can I have a motion to approve the meeting dates for the 2025-2026 school year? Ms. Pignataro, second. Ms. Kane? Yeah, we'll swap it out. They sound similar. And the reorg meeting right now is July 1st, obviously. Oh. I'm missing it. Is that bad? It's the first Tuesday. All right, so it's in quotes, so I guess if there's an issue with any trustees, it could be moved. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Moving on to our last agenda item for tonight. Can I have a motion to accept the legal notice for the 2025 budget vote and election to be held on May 21st, 2025? Ms. Conley, second. Ms. Pignataro, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? At this time, we open up to the community members for any new or old business. Not hearing any, we'll open up to the trustees for any new business. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Johnson, second by Ms. Pignataro. All in favor? Thank you guys so much. Have a great night. Our next boarding will be on March 25th.